Okay, so let's see, we have about 138 people on. Thank you for being here. We want to share what to expect this evening. So we will start with an overview of the process to develop this control plan. We'll share some key concepts and then the process of selecting preferred alternatives. And then we will spend a lot of time previewing the alternatives that are under consideration to reduce or eliminate CSOs, and we'll do that by each of the water bodies. We'll talk through next steps and what to expect in the next year beyond. And then a little after 7, we'll turn to public input. We'll do a brief online poll, and then we'll open up for questions, some comments. We really want to make sure there's time for questions. There's a lot of technical information that's going to be presented tonight, so we want to make sure you can understand that and are ready to give comment on that draft plan. So as I mentioned, we'll be covering some of these key concepts this evening. It'll be somewhat brief, and especially for those that are newer to the project, there's a lot of information on the project website, which Charlotte will, thanks Charlotte, put in the chat. And so we recommend that you look through prior meeting slides and recordings if you're confused about some of these key concepts. And then also there's detailed information about tonight's meeting. So these slides are posted online along with even more information about each of the alternatives that are being considered. 2 housekeeping things. We are recording this meeting, and that recording will be posted on the project website, so you can refer back to it. And then also, if you are having any technical issues, please do email Charlotte. And thanks, Charlotte, for putting your email in the chat, but it's cgoodman@cbi.org. Okay, I think with that, we're ready to turn to this overview of the updated combined sewer overflow control plans process. Rich from the city of Cambridge, you are up. And if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself first. Did I say Cambridge? City of Somerville, excuse me.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks for that overview and welcome everybody. I am Richard Raish, Director of Infrastructure and Asset Management for the City of Somerville. As Abby said, we're going to start off with a little bit of background, some key concepts, and about our process. So we can probably advance. There we go. So just, for anyone who's joining late to our regularly scheduled program or just wants a reminder, this is really a continuation of CSO control efforts in the region. These efforts have been underway since the 80s, have done some tremendous good in reducing the volume of CSO that goes to the regional waters. The last round of construction was from an approved plan that I acknowledged that the Alewife, Charles, and Mystic weren't going to reach regional water quality goals and therefore established this secondary process to come back and address those outfalls in what are called the variance waters, the Alewife, Mystic, and Charles. So that's our area of focus. For anyone who doesn't know what a CSO is, in most modern systems, there are 2 sets of pipes in the street, one for stormwater and one for sanitary that are separate. In Cambridge, Somerville, and parts of Boston, and other municipalities outside of the MWRA service zone like Haverhill and Fall River, we have an older system that is combined under dry weather conditions or small rainstorms. It works great because it sends all the sanitary flow plus some dirty stormwater to Deer Island for treatment. But when it rains heavily like it does today or right now, that system gets overwhelmed, and there are sort of relief points in the system that spill that combined sewage to the nearby waterways. Now, that is as gross as it sounds, and certainly CSOs are a large source of pollution in those receiving water bodies, but they are not the only source of pollution in those receiving water bodies. There's pollution that comes from dry weather, from interconnections that are inappropriate, from wildlife, and certainly there's a lot of pollution that comes from separated stormwater, including bacteria and oils and grease and nutrients. So it's important to understand that there are a lot of negative impacts from all that pollution, water quality, environmental health, and primarily of concern is public health. But it is important to remember that eliminating the CSOs alone does not by itself result in swimmable and fishable water bodies. Those other sources of pollution are still of a concern to the region. But what we're here talking about CSOs, and again, this is the continuation of that CSO plan. So we're sort of focused on that for today's purposes. We have a number of tools that are available to us for reducing CSOs, sewer separation, essentially creating that second set of pipes so that sanitary and stormwater aren't combined in a single pipe. Storage that would, instead of allowing that CSO to dump into the rivers, temporarily hold it. There's a larger version of that would be a large diameter, deep tunnel. Another way we can handle that is by increased conveyance, expanding the capacity of the system to handle those wet weather flows. And finally, although maybe first in the line of defense, is green stormwater infrastructure. That is, things that we can do in the watershed that capture stormwater before it gets into the combined sewer system. Now, we take those tools and combine them. Certainly some alternatives for solving CSOs could entirely be, one of those tools, but it's much more efficient to combine those tools. Each one of these things have its own pluses and minuses in terms of effectiveness. And so what the technical team has been doing for the past years and months are stitching those tools together in creative ways to create an alternative that is a holistic way of addressing the CSOs. Next, we'll step into our process to select the alternatives. Later in the meeting, as Abby outlined, we're going to introduce you to those alternatives, and there are 37 of them, so buckle up. But first, we're going to discuss our process on how to select a preferred alternative. A preferred alternative is the one that will be selected by those project partners, the cities of Somerville and Cambridge, as well as MWRA, for advancement into the draft CSO long-term control plan. And at the tail end of the presentation, we'll describe exactly what that is and what the future process is. There will be one preferred alternative per receiving water body. So the Alewife, Charles, and Mystic will each have a preferred alternative, which is a combined set of tools, a suite of projects. Now we're analyzing all of these alternatives against future conditions. The previous plan looked backward, and frankly, to our knowledge, every CSO plan in the nation has always looked backwards to evaluate those alternatives. Looking through historical rainfall data and putting together what is known as a typical year that has a range of storms, a number of storms, a total amount of precipitation, storms of different size that sort of reflect what typically happens. We did this through a future looking lens, looking at how climate change is increasing the intensity of storms, and developed what we call a 2050 typical year, what we anticipate conditions to look like in 2050, which, as you can imagine, are larger and more intense storms. And that's spread out over the course of the year. So there's something like 90 storms that happen in that typical year. We're also evaluating it for larger storms that happen less frequently, but are in higher intensity. And you can see in the table here just how large those storms can get. And also in the table here, you see some storms that people remember, just to give you context for what type of storms that we're evaluating. So it's good to think about those storms in sort of context. And we're going to show a few maps that that show how the region reacts to precipitation like that. So, this is just a base map under dry weather or typical conditions that show what our cities and the water bodies look like um, uh, under sort of typical year conditions. On the next slide, this is a result from our hydraulic model. Our hydraulic model is the tool that we use to analyze both current system performance and alternatives. And all these red dots that you see are manholes in our hydraulic model that essentially, the hydraulic grade line comes up to the surface or very close to the surface. And, under those 20, 50, 25-year storm. And when I say a 25-year storm, that's a storm that statistically happens once every 25 years, or in any given year, therefore has a 4% chance of actually occurring. All of these nodes are essentially a system in failure. So, these are very large storms that cause a lot of problems. Clearly, there are CSO events in the future, but also really difficult storms for our operations people to manage. This is sanitary overflows into the street and certainly backups into people's houses anywhere you see those red dots. So flipping back to the base map, just to orient yourself again, in addition to that system capacity problem where we have sanitary sewer overflows in the streets and in people's houses, we also obviously have localized street flooding. So, under dry weather conditions, we have none, but then flip to the next slide, you can see just how much street flooding we have. And again, what we're able to use here are the hydraulic models of Cambridge, Somerville, and Medford. So the grayed out areas we just don't have information on, but certainly they also have street flooding. But it does give you an impression of, under that large 25-year storm, just how much street flooding we will also be dealing with. And then one final flip back to the base map, just to see normal conditions. And then looking at the streams themselves, a different hydraulic model shows us bank overtopping. And on this one, you can see in the lighter blue, you can really see it around the Alewife in particular on this map, how much, basically river flooding we have, bank overtopping. If we can just like toggle back and forth for a second so that blue pops out a little bit more. Oh, or we'll move on. There you go. Sorry about that. We should have had the flashing lights warning at the top of this broadcast. So, that's just to give you a flavor that, those large rainstorms do a lot in our urban environment. Certainly Cambridge and Somerville and Boston aren't alone. Everywhere faces these kind of challenges when we have storms of that magnitude. But I just wanted to sort of put in perspective what happens on our civil systems under that rain event. So now we'll move into our preferred alternative selection considerations. We've had a couple of community meetings, we've had a couple of workshops, we've identified a number of considerations for criteria, and we'll step through some of these. The first is the level of CSO control, and actually turn it over to Brian from the MWRA to describe what level of control is.
Thanks, Rich. Excuse me. So, yes, I'm Brian Kabosk. I'm the chief engineer at the MWRA. Also, just wanted to point out that several of MWRA's senior leadership team is here tonight. They wanted to make sure they heard comments, heard all the information, and are very engaged in this important process that we're going through here. So, if you jump to the next slide. So we've developed what we're calling 4 levels of control, which are being evaluated as part of this process. So using our detailed hydraulic computer model of wastewater collection system, which includes all the pipes, all the sanitary pipes of Cambridge, Somerville, pump stations of the MWRA, all the MWRA pipes, we're able to predict the number of activations and total volume of CSO that we'd expect in these 2050 storms that Rich mentioned earlier. So the highlighted blue, or the light blue, let me rephrase, light blue columns on the figure show the number of storms out of 90 in that 2050 typical year we are predicting would activate in these different water bodies. So for example, you see 8 activations in the upper Mystic and 13 activations in the Alewife Brook. So the second light blue column shows the total CSO volume expected from those CSOs during that entire year. So, again, the upper Mystic, 29.3 million gallons during that entire year. So 8 storms would produce 29.3 mg. The light blue column in the middle, the third one over there, is the CSO volume predicted in the largest storm in a typical year. So that's the largest event out of those 90. And you can see that this one storm produces a large portion of the CSO expected over the entire 2050 typical year. It's about a third of the upper Mystic, a fourth of the Alewife, and even 40%. So that one storm is going to produce 40%. In comparing the largest storm to the 2050 typical year, we also look at the 5-year storms and the 25-year events. And you can see those two storms, that 5-year and 25-year storm, those are design storms, a single event. You can compare those against the largest storm in the typical year, and you can see a significant increase in volume as you jump up in those design storm years. So based on the future typical year rainfall series at 90 storms, we have a few storms that really generate a lot of flow. So we also are developing what we're calling a limited CSO control in a 2050 typical year. So for some CSOs, the size of the project to capture all the CSOs in a 2050 typical year, including that large storm, is much more significant, much more complex. Therefore, we decided to include alternatives that establish projects that would eliminate most, but not all, of the storms in a typical year. Jumping to the next slide. So the level 2, this is if you had 0 storms or no CSOs in a typical year. It should be noted that some CSOs don't discharge in a 2050 typical year. For example, there's a couple overflows in Cambridge, CAM 002, 007, MWRA 010. They don't overflow. Therefore, no project is required for this level of control at these CSOs that already don't activate in a typical year. You go to the next level, that's our 5-year level of control, or 2050 5-year level of control, which would result in 0 overflows in that design storm. The red boxed volumes are what is required to be captured. So, for example, 65.5 million gallons in the Charles captured to achieve that level of control, a 5-year level of control. And lastly, the greatest level of control evaluated would result in no CSOs in a 2050 25-year design storm. This infrequent event, as Rich mentioned, has a 4% chance of happening out in that 2050 planning horizon. Very large CSO volume to capture, resulting in very large and complex projects. In comparison with the largest storm in the typical year, that light blue column that I mentioned in the center, the Alewife and Charles are predicted to have like 7 to 8 times greater CSO volume to contend with. So a lot more volume to deal with in these very large storms. So I'll turn it back over to Rich to talk about some additional considerations in our alternative selection.
Thanks, Brian. The next batch we can just talk about on this slide. First is capital cost and life cycle cost. All of these capital improvements, and then the ongoing cost to operate them will fall to the cities of Cambridge and Somerville and the MWRA, who will pass it on to all of their ratepayers. So cost is, of course, a consideration that we need to bake into our evaluation. Another one to think about is the timeline to implementation to get to CSO benefits. Again, these alternatives are stitching together large numbers of projects, large numbers of complex projects. And some of the alternatives get to CSO reduction faster than others. So that's a consideration. The impact on priority vulnerable and environmental justice populations. This is a state requirement in acknowledging particularly that prior actions in the state sort of ignored the populations without agency, and that it is incumbent upon all of us to consider that in these types of planning endeavors. Then there's permitting uncertainty and site acquisition risks. We didn't take any alternatives off the table because we thought that they were going to be difficult to do, either difficult to permit, in terms of new outfalls to the rivers, in terms of doing work in DCR land, crossing mass highway rights of way. We didn't eliminate anything, but we did want to identify that some projects have more uncertainty or risk than others. So that would become a criteria by which we evaluate them. And the same with site acquisition. Some of these projects require siting large tanks or drop shafts for tunnels that would require purchasing land. It's particularly as the city of Somerville has learned in the past few years, that carries some risk. The next is a set of benefits criteria, and a lot of these were informed by discussions with the stakeholders, many of whom are here today. And so on the next slide, you can see what those benefits criteria are. Sometimes they're referred to as co-benefits or just evaluation criteria. But, one is CSO performance or water quality performance. What are the water quality benefits or impacts? Again, as I said earlier, stormwater is a large source of pollution. And so how we manage stormwater has a big impact, particularly on phosphorus, which is the limiting pollutant, particularly for the Charles and the Mystic. Construction, what are the impacts to the neighborhood during construction? What are the neighborhood impacts to adjacent public uses? I mean, that could be as simple as a major roadway thoroughfare, knowing we're going to have a lot of detours around that. It could be, some of the locations under consideration are parks or parking lots for parks. And what are those public use impacts during construction? Again, we didn't want to eliminate any alternatives because they seem difficult, but frankly, some of them are easier to construct than others. So the construction complexity or risk in that construction simply became a evaluation criterion. Long-term operations and maintenance, the resiliency. Some things are more scalable than others, have opportunity to upgrade existing infrastructure or provide additional resiliency at the neighborhood level. That becomes a way by which to evaluate. And then finally, community and ancillary benefits, reducing flooding, co-benefits, particularly from green stormwater infrastructure, permanent impacts to public users, and one final one is the impacts from non-variance water CSOs. So we've got a range of these. A lot of these are more technical ones that we can evaluate. And then finally, stakeholder impact. And for that, I will hand it back over to Abby to reflect back what we've been hearing from all of you interested stakeholders who have been attending these meetings and working with us in workshops.
Thanks, Rich. Hello, everyone who has joined since I last spoke. Again, my name is Abby Fulham. I work at the Consensus Building Institute. And just a quick note for meeting logistics before I get into stakeholder input. We have a few hands. We're going to hold questions until the end in that public input portion that will be at a little after 7. And yes, thanks, Charlotte, is putting the link to access the slides if you want to follow along separately. Okay. All right, so, and I'm going to share now some of the key takeaways from stakeholder input on this process. This is going to be really high level key takeaways, although we have heard a lot and really appreciate all of the time and input people have shared. So one thing that has been extremely clear to us is that many people care about CSOs, the problem, and the solutions. And the project team has heard from and engaged a lot of people through public meetings like this, through focus groups, through one-on-one conversations and public tabling. And through all of that, they've heard from abutters to these water bodies. They've heard from residents, watershed associations, and environmental advocates, ratepayers who will be paying for these projects, the city councils of Somerville, Cambridge, the MWRA advisory board and board of directors. Just a lot of people care about this. And we would just want to clarify that engagement will continue to happen once the draft plan is released, and we really look forward to speaking with you and hearing from you then. Okay, so we want to share a few overarching themes. So one is just that people really feel that CSOs are disgusting and a problem, and they are really wanting a sense of urgency to reduce these CSO activations. So that has come through loud and clear. And then there's also been interest in the analysis and the plan incorporating future conditions, both like the climactic ones that Rich was talking about, and then also population development. All right, and so some overarching things. We've also heard a lot of feedback and input on what should be prioritized when selecting a solution or those preferred alternatives. And so this slide and the next one show some feedback that we've heard on what elements should be prioritized. Of course, we're talking to a lot of different people, so we're hearing a lot of different things. This is a no specific list. Okay, so let's see, we've heard an interest in selecting a preferred alternative that reduces and eliminates CSOs, and all of that has with the goal of improving public health, improving water quality, habitat, recreation, and the aesthetic, the smell, the visual aspects of CSOs. Interest in a preferred alternative that reduces and eliminates sanitary sewer overflows, that improves ecosystem health, that includes near-term improvement to the Alewife Brook. We've heard interest in preferred alternatives that maximize nature-based solutions when possible, in preferred alternatives that provide meaningful benefits to environmental justice communities and abutters, and that have short construction timelines. We have also heard interest in preferred alternatives that reduce flooding and flood risk, that are citable, that allow for increased recreation, that rehabilitate old degraded sewer infrastructure, and that are coordinated with other municipal plans and goals. Now, these last two pieces are italicized because, as I said, originally, like we heard from a lot of different people who will want to see different things, and who would rank some of these as more important or less important. And we also heard from people conflicting advice. From some people, we heard that it was really important to pick a preferred alternative that minimizes neighborhood disruption during construction. And from others, we heard that's not so important. Don't prioritize that. Similarly, we heard from people that it's really important to prioritize the costs and the affordability of these projects to the ratepayers. And then we heard from others that we should not prioritize this and that it's not important. So there's a lot of input that we've gotten from the public and from other city councils and boards and advisory boards and organizations, and we really appreciate all of that. And this is one of the considerations that the project team is using to select the preferred alternatives. All right, and so now we want to share these 37 preferred alternatives with you. So Luchika Hiller from the city of Cambridge is going to do a little orientation on how we're going to talk about these, and then she's going to jump right in. So Luchika.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome My name is Luchika Hiller. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the CSO Control Program with the City of Cambridge. I'm joined today by Jim Wilcox, the City Engineer, and Diane Stokes, the Director of Engineering Services. So like Abby said, we took all this feedback and using our unified computer model and future precipitation data, we modeled hundreds of scenarios to understand what is possible in terms of reducing, eliminating CSOs, which tools work better and where, and what is possible to engineer and build. While we did that, right, we came to some key technical decisions. Through our modeling, we found that full sewer separation will not eliminate sewage going into the rivers, and we will still have sanitary sewer overflows in some areas during large storm events. You saw the map that Rich shared with the red dots. Additionally, with sewer separation, we're introducing more stormwater. That is a problem both in terms of the pollutants in the stormwater, but also the quantity that we will be introducing into small brooks such as the Alewife. Sewer separation is time-consuming, so we've heard the urgency to build faster. For all these reasons, you will see that we are including sewer separation in some of our alternatives, but not as extensive as full sewer separation. CSO treatment is another tool we have, but that just reduces and eliminates the bacteria from a CSO discharge, not the actual CSO discharge volume. So this was removed as a viable option for this plan because treatment requires both an underground storage tank and an above-ground large building. Think something like Cottage Farm or the Somerville Marginal Facility, where chemicals such as chlorine are stored and used. Storage tanks, like combined sewer overflow storage tanks without treatment, can help us reduce CSO volumes without the need for trucking, chemicals, and additional buildings for our O&M needs. Green stormwater infrastructure is not an effective tool for CSO control, as it cannot by itself capture the immense amount of stormwater we need to see CSO reduction for these future climate conditions. Our alternatives include GSI more at a regional scale to see if that has an impact in helping us with the gray infrastructure needs. We want to reiterate our commitment to include GSI for projects that include excavation or sewer separation, because we know the co-benefits for the community and how important stormwater treatment is. Okay, with that in mind, right, somebody already mentioned, we came up with 37 alternatives that we are considering for the draft report plan, right? They span the 4 different levels of CSO control that Brian mentioned, and our 3 water bodies. They range from limited CSOs in the 2050 typical year to no CSOs in that large future 25-year storm. In the next slides, we will go into some detail about the 37 alternatives. We will go pretty fast and highlight major components and differences between the alternatives. This information and additional details for the sub-projects is actually available right now on our joint website. I'm going to ask Abby or Charlotte to put it again in the chat. We hope, that you will go there and look through more. This is what you will see in the draft report, and we will present additional detail and information in the draft report. Okay, we'll start with the 12 alternatives that we've developed for the Alewife Brook. This is a summary table that shows the 12 alternatives. They're arranged by level of control in each column. with a naming convention, for example, 1AB, 2AB, right, 11AB, AB standing for Alewife Brook. You will see for the Mystic, we have a different, and the Charles, a different letter combination. In the first column, right, for 0 CSOs in the 2050 typical year, we looked at projects for each outfall. So you'll see groupings of smaller projects and a variety of approaches going from storage, like you see tanks and tunnels, and then also separation and micro tunnels. These all make up these alternatives. For some of these projects, we found that having limited CSOs, right, the second column, at certain outfalls may greatly benefit the implementation burden, the cost, and timeline for these projects. Then when we go to these larger storms, the 5-year and the 25-year storms, so columns, third and fourth column, we found out that we need regional approaches for that much water, right? These levels of control are focused on storage, as we have stated in past meetings. We have also evaluated a regional green stormwater infrastructure alternative since GSI is most effective for CSO control at this scale, and looked at whether or not this would reduce the size of the tunnel needed to capture residual CSOs. Okay, so to orient people, all our alternative slides will look like this. They're very similar. What you see here is a map of sort of the tributary area in the Alewife Brook, and then in the purple triangles, you see where the CSO outfalls are, or regulators. The purple sort of diamond rhombus at the top of this screen represents the Alewife Brook pump station, but in other project sheets, they represent relevant facilities in our region. And then for this project, Project 1 AB integrated, we are proposing 3 combined sewer overflow tanks showed here in these yellow dots. About 264 acres of sewer separation shown here in this blue polygon. A large storm drain showed here in that blue line along Mass Ave. This project will require land acquisition somewhere in the blue polygon to slow down stormwater before it can be released into the Alewife Brook. GSI is not explicitly shown here or in any of these alternative sheets, but it is included as part of sewer separation and other excavation work. You see that we estimate this project to take about 31 years, and we have a range of these preliminary costs between 700 to 1.2 billion. A note about all these costs at this stage of the project: they're still being reviewed for quality control and assurance, and are subject to change. The second alternative is a hybrid of the first. So this one changes a little bit. We could get to the same level of CSO control, right? 0 CSOs in the 2050 typical year, but we could do it faster in 20 years and also cheaper for $350 to $580 million by doing 2 CSO tanks, less sewer separation, about 100 acres, and including a half-a-mile long micro tunnel showed here in this green line. The third alternative for the Alewife Brook is making additional improvements in terms of timeline to get to the same level of CSO control, right? We estimate about 15 years. It's cheaper, again, somewhere between 200 and 340 million, and still has 2 large CSO tanks, but it has very little sewer separation and instead a 1-mile long micro tunnel. Alternative 4 is a regional approach that includes a 1.5 mile tunnel, 11-foot diameter. Imagine two people standing over each other. This is how big this tunnel will be. This will take about 15-20 years to complete and cost between $440 and $740 million. There's also additional pipes that will need to be increased, seen here in this dashed blue line, and the tunnel alignment is shown here in red, and the small little orange dots represent the tunnel trough shafts. Alternative 5 is the exact same as alternative 4 is the tunnel, but includes GSI here, and you can see the inclusion of large-scale GSI. The tunnel size doesn't change, right? We still need just as big of a tunnel to get there. Alternative 6 is what we looked at for sewer separation in this area. To get to 0 CSOs in the 2050 typical year, Cambridge and Somerville will need to separate about 900 acres. We estimate this to take more than 50 years and cost somewhere between, $1 or $2 billion, as we need to consider significant land acquisition for storage, treating, and stormwater. And I'm sorry, I'm not moving, so my office lights went off. Okay, alternative number 7 is a version of the first alternative we showed, but this only gets us to limited CSOs in the typical year. This alternative includes smaller size tanks and the micro tunnel, and this will get us from what we expect to be 13 activations and 20.9 million gallons in the future typical year to 12 activations and $6.6 million. This is still going to take 20 years, and you see the cost here. Alternative 8 is a hybrid of what I showed you previously, and this one includes 0.5 mile long microtunnel instead of Somerville sewer separation, and this can get us down to 4 activations and 3.8 million gallon of discharges in the 2050 typical year for about $200 million, and it will take somewhere between 10 and 20 years. Okay, alternative 9. Now we're going into the large, right, 5-year storm level of control. So to get to that level of control, 0 CSOs in the 2050 typical year, we are proposing a large diameter tunnel. It's similarly long, right, 1.5 miles, but it's a 22-foot diameter as opposed to the 11-foot diameter. So this is about 3.5 people. And for this tunnel, we will also need an odor control facility and a dewatering pump station. This will take about 12 to 15 years in the range of what you see here, about $1 billion. Moving on, alternative 10. This is the same tunnel as before, but includes GSI, right? And this, as you can see, the size of the tunnel stays the same. So GSI definitely has co-benefits, but it's not helping us reduce the size of our tunnels. Alternative 10, this is the tunnel proposed for the largest level of control that we're considering, right? 0 CSOs in the 25-year storm.
That's 11, right? I think you just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yes, 11. Thank you. Oh, no. Alternative 11, this has a 1.5 mile long tunnel, and you could see the diameter is 10 foot larger or thicker than before. So we estimate same duration in terms of construction as we did for the 5-year storm tunnel, but the cost here almost doubles. And lastly, the last alternative we're considering for the Alewife Brook is the large tunnel and GSI for the 25-year level of control. You can see sort of the costs are similar, the implementation time similar, and the tunnel needs to be just as large. And again, I'm going really fast through these. Please ask us questions as we move into the Q&A session of this. I'm going to pass it on to Rich, I think, to talk about the other alternatives in the Mystic River.
Thanks, Chica. We look over at the Mystic. The approach is the same as in the Alewife. So we've got alternatives for the different levels of control. And each one is sort of an elaboration on previous ones as we step through the numerical alternatives. So we can jump right in. The approach is the same as what Lucica outlined, so I might go a little bit faster. So if we go to the next slide, the starting point here for typical year that we analyzed started with sort of a good deal of sewer separation in the Winter Hill area, and then a storage tank for CSO flows down in the assembly area. We're sort of targeting that for the parking lot area in front of Staples at the moment. It will be a development parcel for assembly, but right now that's sort of the target for it. I will point out that while, on these slides, while we are counting this as a one tank alternative, that's because that is a one CSO tank, combined flow tank, that's directly reducing CSO flow. The sewer separation in the Winter Hill area does require construction of in-system stormwater storage tanks. We have limitations on just how big we can construct those new big stormwater pipes in already congested and frankly narrow roads. So there's a hydraulic capacity issue on sewer separation. And so to avoid extensive flooding on day one, the first time that new stormwater system sees a decent sized rainfall, we have to have tanks in the system. And folks from Somerville who've been following this are familiar with the concept of tanks, particularly in the Gilman area, that for this alternative, you would need that, which is why you see land acquisition as a yes here, because we would have to acquire land for that tank as well as the CSO tank. Moving on from there to the next one, which is a hybrid, the second. So on this one, we sort of refined that, reduced the area of sewer separation, but increased the size of the tank down in Assembly Square. That also gets us away from the need for a tank in Gilman Square. So you can kind of see where the technical team is going with this. You also see a lower price tag and a faster timeline to elimination for that same level of control. Moving on from there, additional alternative for typical year. It's like, well, what if we just did no sewer separation at all and just built a very big tank? And so now we're into like a 10.5 million gallon tank, which frankly probably isn't technically feasible, but we wanted to leave it on the table there. As I said earlier in the evaluation criteria, we didn't want to take things off of the table. We wanted to put them on the table and evaluate them. So you see that the price tag and the timeline to implementation are slightly different from that hybrid, but it has higher land acquisition risk. Moving on from there, we sort of as Lucica alluded to in the tunnels, said, well, what if we stayed on the idea of a tank on storage, but then did extensive GSI in the upstream areas to reduce the size. And so you see the size of the tank goes down, the cost associated with that tank goes down, but the overall implementation cost goes up because we're doing a lot more GSI.
Rich, this one is number 4, just for those who are trying to match.
Right. Thank you. So in the 5th, again, this is essentially the same alternative that Uchika put up. This is the the total sewer separation for all the combined areas. It's a large area. It's a long timeline to implement. I do want to highlight again that sewer separation does not get us to 0 CSOs or 0 sanitary discharge into the riverways for storms larger than the typical year. That might be a little difficult to get your head around, but it is essentially impossible to keep all stormwater out of a sanitary system. So even the separated areas like Belmont, Arlington, Medford, Watertown, stormwater makes its way into the sanitary system, particularly in those large flows. And so even the sanitary system gets overwhelmed on that, which causes those other types of overflows in the large storms. And I will also highlight, you will have noticed that there is a asterisk at the bottom of all of these. All of these costs are preliminary and under review. The technical team is trying to move this work as quickly as possible to hit our deadline of submitting the draft report at the end of this year. But we also want to have these public meetings and show our work as we're going. So a lot of this is still work in progress. So a lot of, particularly at this point, the cost numbers are changing. The areas, the acres of sewer separation and the size of the tank, those numbers are fairly well locked down, possibly entirely locked down, but we're still working on the costs. So I did want to highlight that before moving on. Okay, moving to the next level of control, the less than typical year. The analysis here was to see if we were to scale back some of those alternatives, some of those lower cost alternatives for the typical year, if we were to scale them back a little bit more and see if there was sort of a break point, a near the curve on the cost per gallon. And so these less than typical year ones sort of do that. So the less than typical year option number 5, MR hybrid 1, is really an outgrowth of the typical year hybrid 1 that scales back. It keeps the same sewer separation area, but reduces the size of the tank. And for this, what would result is instead of 0 events and 0 gallons, it would be an activation twice in that typical year with a spill of about 6.8 million gallons. And you compare that to what our baseline is. Again, these are 2050 projections. But if we were to do nothing, we would expect 8 activations and almost 30 million gallons. So just to compare, what this alternative gets you. Moving on to number 6. This is the same thought process as the other hybrid 2, a tank only, and you see that cuts that tank size from about 10 million gallons to 5 million gallons, and again it reduces the CSOs, from 8 in a typical year and 30 million gallons down to 2 in a typical year and about 8 million gallons. Moving in the what am I looking at? 7?
Yes.
I guess this jumps back to let's go on to the next one.
Okay.
Going in the opposite direction, trying to get to that 5-year level of control. For this, we've got to go to storage, because again, when you get to the 5-year level of control, the sewer separation isn't effective anyway. So this is a storage tank, a deep storage tank. Although we did look at on alternative number 9 on the next slide, putting that sewer separation back in, but also having the tank to get you to that 5-year level of control. Again, if you compare this to typical year hybrid 1, that's simply a larger tank to account for the fact that we do have more discharge. Moving up to the 25-year level of control. Again, it's basically just another larger storm. The tank size gets up to almost 17 million gallons. Very difficult to construct, so it has a higher price tag. And on number 11 on the next slide, same idea as the tank that we discussed before. What if you did the storage tank, but did GSI to cut down that volume, so the volume goes down, but the cost goes up with the GSI. And then finally, another hybrid one here that puts that sewer separation back in to see where the size of the tank goes. It increases the timeline for implementation because we've got a larger sewer separation area. But it's just a different alternative for us to evaluate at that level of control. So I hope that made some sense. Obviously there's a lot to digest here. I imagine people with interest in the area can download the deck from the website that Charlotte put in there, and we're happy to answer questions either today or at another opportunity. So now I'll turn it over to Brian to step through the same sort of rationale in the Charles River.
Yep, I think Jeremy is going to cover this one. So, Jeremy.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeremy Hall. I'm a program manager at the MWRA. And tonight I'll be going over the 13 alternatives we are evaluating for the various levels of CSO control in the Charles River. As Luchika and Rich have already done, they've gone over how we're going to use this table. We're going to use tools to create alternatives. And for the Charles River, we looked at applying CSO control tools at individual outfalls. So you will see groupings of these CSO control tools that make up these alternatives for the Charles River. For some of these alternatives, we found that leaving a limited CSO discharge at certain outfalls may greatly reduce the implementation burden, the cost, and the timeline for these projects, like Rich and Luchika have already said. So if you look at the middle column where so those are the ones where we would have less than typical year results, and those would be alternatives 8 and 9. In the next column, we move up to the larger design storms, the 5 and the 25 year, which require a regional approach, as others have already mentioned, for handling the massive volume of water that is associated with those storms. So obviously with those large storms, we are focused on storage alternatives. And I think others have already touched on this, but I'll just reiterate, GSI can be used in 2 ways. 1, to reduce volume getting into the system, and 2, for treating stormwater before going into a water body when a new stormwater discharge is created. So, next slide. So here's alternative 1 for the Charles River. It is the integrated alternative, and this alternative utilizes the integrated approach where we've combined tanks, tunnels, and storage conduits into a single alternative. The key features of this alternative include 4 storage tanks, which are scattered. I don't have my mouse, but I appreciate if others could point for me. And a 2.5 million gallon storage tank over at Cam 5, top left. A 0.6 million gallon tank at Cam 17, and 2 smaller tanks to capture the CSO tributary to MWRA 023. This alternative also includes a 2-mile, 17-foot diameter tunnel providing storage for outfalls MWRA 201, MWRA 18, 19, and 20, which are in the middle along the Charles. This alternative is anticipated to take 15 years to construct and is estimated to cost between 770 million to $1.2 billion. Moving on to alternative number 2. This alternative is based on the first alternative that we saw, the integrative. However, we've replaced the tank at Cam 17 with 80 acres of sewer separation, so that blue area in the top middle of your screen. The time to complete for both of these options, integrated 1 and this hybrid number 1, are both to be about 15 years to construct. Next. Alternative 3 builds upon hybrid 2 and on hybrid 1 by replacing the storage tunnel with a 10.2 million gallon tank located at Magazine Beach in Cambridge. Yep, right there. And that tank is designed to capture treated CSO from Cottage Farm, the 204 acres of partial sewer separation in the back bay, that other blue dot. I'm pointing to my screen like you guys can see that. And a 9-foot diameter micro tunnel along the Charles River Esplanade to store the flow from 18, 19, and 20. The partial sewer separation allows for stormwater from smaller events to continue to be conveyed to Deer Island, which takes most of the storms in the typical year, and the all-important first flush, capturing the phosphorus and other pollutants that we would see associated with that first flush of stormwater. Next. So moving on to hybrid number 3, it's the same as hybrid 2, but includes additional sewer separation areas. So it brings the total areas of sewer separation to 446 acres.
All right,
And
Jeremy, to interrupt, am I on the wrong one then? Let me go back. Didn't we, I think we just did 3. Is that right? We just did that one.
Yeah, we should be on 4.
Okay. Oh, I see Charles River Hybrid 3, which is number 4. Sorry, thanks.
That's okay. All right, so just to go back, this is similar to the other hybrid, but it is solely based on sewer separation, which reduces the need for the microtunnel. So moving on to Charles River Tunnel. And so this is a tunnel to control the flow in a 2050 typical year. And this alternative replaces the sewer separation and local storage with a 4.5 mile long, 12-foot diameter tunnel under and along the Charles River. You can see that red line in the middle of your screen. The smaller conduits associated with REO 46 and REO 046-100 and 46-381, these will remain. So that, yep, you're circling the right area. So this alternative will take 10 to 20 years to complete and will cost between $1 billion and $1.6 billion. Next. So this is the same alternative plus GSI. And the GSI reduces the amount of stormwater entering the tunnel. However, it does not decrease the diameter or the length of the tunnel. And the time to construct is the same as the previous, at about 15 to 20 years. And with the additional cost, with the GSI component, obviously the cost has increased as well. Next slide. So now this is, so the others have already described that we did look at sewer separations for a 0 CSOs in a 2050 typical year. And in order for this region to meet that requirement, for the Charles, we would have to do 4,400 acres of separation. And associated with that 4,400 acres would be an increased phosphorus load by 2,500 pounds. And obviously there would be an additional cost and challenges to try and remove that phosphorus once the system has been separated. Next one. So now, as mentioned on the first table for the Charles River, we do have a few limited levels of control, and we call this one 8CR Hybrid 1. And this one includes a 2.5 million gallon storage tank at Camp 5, top left of the screen. And that is the same level of control as in the other project. And we also have 80 acres of sewer separation at Camp 17, which you've seen at another project. But this alternative also includes 188 acres of partial sewer separation, which picks up MWRA 18, 19, and 20, and a small storage conduit down at REO 46-100. Which, so based on the typical year, we would still have a small discharge out at 18, 19, and 20, and at MWRA 023, as indicated in the table. And Cottage Farm will also continue to have discharges, but it is predicted to discharge 4 times in the 2050 typical year and is treated. This alternative reduces the activation and frequency, as I mentioned, from the baseline, and with the majority of the remaining flow to be treated at Cottage Farm. The time to construct would be about 25 years, and at an estimated cost of between $220 to $360 million. So moving on to hybrid number 2, which is, again, it's a limited level of CSO control for the 2050 typical year. And the difference between this one and the previous one is the 188 acres of sewer separation is replaced with an 8-foot diameter micro tunnel. So if you see that green line, yep. And the time to complete for this project is 8 to 13 years, which is a much shorter duration and at a cost of between 180 and $300 million. Alternative 10CR is a tunnel that is designed to achieve 0 CSOs in the 2050 5-year design storm. So now we're talking about these large storms, which are just, really, really large storms to think about. This alternative on this page is, it shows the red line down the middle of the page over the Charles River, which would be a 4.5 mile long, 24-foot diameter tunnel. So I'm thinking we could drive the duck boat through that tunnel. And this alternative also utilizes a 1 mile long, 6-foot diameter micro tunnel, replacing the individual storage conduits. So this project is estimated to take 15 to 20 years to construct at a cost of between $1.2 billion and $2.2 billion. So now we're on to 11CR, which is the tunnel plus GSI. So this is a 5-year level of control with GSI. And we're essentially covering 90 acres of GSI under this option in the 1 mile long, 6-foot diameter micro tunnel at the bottom. This project would take 15 to 20 years to construct at a cost of $1.3 billion to $2.3 billion. CR number 12 is another tunnel. Now this tunnel has been designed to capture 0 overflows in the 25-year storm. And the key components of this is a 32-foot diameter tunnel and is 4.5 miles long. This alternative would also utilize a 1 mile long, 9-foot diameter micro tunnel and storage, and GSI would be included with any of the components with any street excavation. And this project is estimated to take between 15 and 20 years at an estimated cost of $1.8 to $3.1 billion. Moving on to 13. And this is essentially the same project plus GSI. And again, I think others have mentioned earlier that GSI, when we looked at this example, it didn't change the diameter of the tunnel. but, you know, it is an evaluation that we did to, you know, investigate the validity of doing GSI. The time to complete on this project would be 15 to 20 years at a cost of $1.9 to $3.2 billion. And I believe I'm going to hand it over to Chika, who's going to go over the initial observations for the draft updated CSO control plan.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who made it through the 37 alternatives. So taking a step back, we're maybe looking into sort of where we want to be in the future. The reason why we're doing all this work is with a goal to improve water quality. That is the task and that is the ask, right? One important point to make here is that the majority of CSO discharges into the Mystic and the Charles do not have live bacteria. Existing CSO facilities like the Cottage Farm on the Charles and some of the marginal on the Mystic neutralize or kill the bacteria before these CSOs discharge. Our initial water quality modeling for this project shows that reducing or eliminating CSOs would reduce, for the short term, the peak bacteria concentrations in our rivers. But bacteria concentrations will still be high and above regulatory limits because of stormwater and other sources of pollution that Rich mentioned earlier in the presentation. And communities like Somerville and Cambridge and others in this area and throughout Massachusetts continue to invest in stormwater management to improve water quality and address flooding. Other things we are now looking into, right, is we understand the cost benefit is analysis is important to consider, same as affordability to the ratepayers. These projects will be paid by all of us and the water and sewer ratepayers in Somerville, Cambridge, and MWRA member communities. We can continue, as we have done for the past, I don't know, I can't do math right now, it's too late, 40 plus years, towards reducing CSOs in our water bodies. What we found is we could do it potentially faster and cheaper with gray infrastructure, tanks and tunnels. And again, reminder that the draft plan will recommend one preferred alternative per receiving water. So one for the Alewife, one for the Charles, and one for the Mystic River. I'm passing it on to Brian to go a little bit into more detail about what to expect in the next 13 months.
Thank you, Luchika. All right, so the project partners here, Cambridge, Somerville, MWRA, made some great progress in developing and coming up with this whole list of alternatives under consideration and presented tonight. So the solid red line on this chart that shows where we are now, the number 5 marked with the green circle there, that's where we are tonight. We are a little behind where we had hoped to be, but we feel we can get to the major milestone of submitting this draft plan by the end of the year. The draft plan will include all these CSO, all these alternatives that we've described tonight, as well as other alternatives that we evaluated and didn't feel it was appropriate to carry forward in this alternative analysis. So, bottom line, we thought of a lot of things. All that stuff will be documented in the draft report that you'll be able to review in December. So along with DEP and EPA, the draft plan will be available, for your review by the end of the year. We'll then organize another public meeting, that number 6 in the green circle there. That's number 6 public meeting where we'll present the draft report along with our alternative selection process and solicit some initial comments from DEP and you, the interested stakeholders. So we expect the review and comment period along with a public hearing to take about 5 months to May of 2026. Comments will be taken into consideration at that point, and we'll be developing that final report to submit in January of 2027. That's going to be followed by a MEPA review period, after which DEP and EPA will set the next steps for further CSO control in these various waters. Next slide. So this kind of says similar type thing in a different format, but I think it's helpful to just kind of block it out in the 3 years remaining. So this 2025, we've got a lot of work to do here. We're coming to the finish line. So we are, in the process of finalizing some scoring based on those criteria Rich was talking about. We're working on affordability of the recommended alternatives. So EPA has guidance on affordability in determining what is affordable. So we're using that guideline to develop those evaluations. We're finalizing some water quality impact information, and in moving forward to develop that draft plan in 2026. Public meetings, hearings, additional outreach. We will be doing some additional meetings in the region to make sure that others are aware of this, contacting potential abutters and such to make sure that they are aware of some of the proposals that we're considering. And the team's going to review comments received from yourselves, DEP, EPA, and we'll address those in the final plan, which will be submitted in the beginning of January. So we'll go through that MEPA review, DEP, EPA, provide some additional comments, and then we're off designing projects and hopefully moving to construction. So that's the general timeline of next few years. So at this point, I think I'll turn it back to Ona or Abby.
Back to me. Thank you. Thank you, Brian and Jeremy and Rich and Luchika, for all of that information. We're hoping that because this is recorded and available online, people can go back and sort of rewatch and think about things as needed, because that is, of course, kind of a fire hose of information. We did our very best. The teams worked hard to put the key information so it's easily findable across all the alternatives. And now we want to go to hearing from those of you who are here in attendance. We have 142 of you in the sort of attendee role right now, which is fantastic. We're going to do this 2 ways because not everyone is comfortable speaking in front of 142 people. We're going to take the first, 6, 7, 8 minutes to do this in writing, and then we're going to open the floor for verbal comments. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use Mentimeter, and I don't think I said hello. I'm Ona Ferguson. I work at the Consensus Building Institute with Abby. Invite you all to either open a new window if you're on a computer and type in menti.com and then enter this code, or use your phone if you want to and use the QR code to get to this Mentimeter poll. And there are 4 questions on the poll, and you can do them at your own speed. We put them here so you would know what was coming. And you're free to just type in your thoughts. Where you live and where you work are the first 2. And then what is your top feedback for the project partners as they develop the draft updated CSO control plan, and who should be engaged once the draft plan is released in early 2026. So we're going to give you, 2-3 minutes to type in, and then we will just take a quick look at who's here and get a sense of the responses.
Oh, no, I'm watching the Menti and our numbers are slowing. Do you want me to start sharing?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
You'll stop. Great. So this is where folks come from who have filled that out. Where people work. Our other and our Boston are the same colors, which is a tiny bit confusing. And Boston. Thanks. And then we're going to do two things here. We're going to just sort of scroll through some of these responses. So this is your top feedback. So things to consider, encouragement to go faster, and the shorter timeline is great. Other votes for complete sewer separation 2050, another faster interim work would be great to improve water quality. Highest levels of control. People appreciating the thorough analysis. Query about public health impacts. A lot of points about timeline. This is for our kids and grandkids. Hey, don't forget Alewife Brook is the most impacted. Can keep skimming. We'll post these responses on the project website so you can read through them and see them in detail. So we'll make those available. 25-year level of storage, stormwater, think about rate per water quality. Who gets to decide what's too expensive? It's so complicated. Thanks for trying to make this participatory. People looking forward to rewatching. Do Alewife first. All right, let's go to the next one, and everybody come back and read those at your leisure once we get them up. Should be shortly. And then who should we engage? So once the plan is released at the end of this calendar year, advice on who should be engaged. There are a lot of dittos, which I think means people were seeing somebody above their, some comment above theirs, but I'm not sure which one it was. So environmental groups, local stakeholders, environmental justice, ratepayers, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, all the professionals who presented, lots of local people, low-income customers, all the residents of Arlington, Somerville, and Cambridge, all of MWRA ratepayers, city councils, watershed associations, conservation commissions, MBTA and DCR. All right, thank you. We appreciate your suggestions. I know the project team is going to be working to get the word out and get input early in the new year. Now we're going to switch to verbal comment. I see some hands in that some of you have raised your hands already, 6 of you. I would like to ask if you intend to ask a question or make a comment, could you put up your Zoom hand now? And can we go to the slide that shows, there should be like a little hand icon at the bottom of your screen. If you put up your hand now, we can sort of figure out how much time we need. If you are calling in on a phone, when you have the ability to speak, you're gonna want to hit *6 to unmute and remute, and you would need to hit *9 to raise your hand. And if you change your mind about speaking, please lower your hand. Will you go back one slide now, please? So we have 12 people who have raised their hands, so we can give you 2 minutes each. These can be questions for the team. They can be comments or reflections on the alternatives. The team will try to give responses to the extent they are able to the questions. And we're also going to keep things moving. So we'll do some kind of balancing of those. And when it's your turn to speak, we will promote you from a webinar attendee to a panelist, and you'll be able to unmute yourself so you can be heard and also turn on your video so you can be seen. but you'll get sort of an invitation to be promoted and you'll have to click yes. So look for that when I say you're up next. And I'm going to put a timer in. It will be in my Zoom window. So you can look for that. Let's take down this slide. Thank you. And I'm going to start with Patty Nolan and then Kristen Anderson. I'll try to give you sort of the preview to ahead. So let's promote Patty and we can get ready to promote Kristen in a minute. And Patty, please go ahead.
Thanks so much. I maybe won't take 2 minutes. I heard some of this. I'm on the city council in Cambridge, very excited. I think the questions I put in the chat are partly about, we talk about the cost. It's really important for all 3 entities to have a combined cost together to understand what it is stepping back and also what the average cost for ratepayers would be. And then the other element is, because that's not clear at all, and I know there'll be a balance. But then the other thing is the public health impact of not doing it, because there's a cost to not doing it as well, and the public health benefit of doing it in terms of a cleaner river and people using it. There's often economic benefits of doing it. And I know these are really tricky things to work on, but I think it's really important that I as a policymaker and you all as the people who are going to be cleaning this up, think about that end of the spectrum as well in terms of cost and benefit.
Thank you so much. Great. Let's go next to Kristen and then we'll go to Diane Mann.
Oh, now before we go, I don't see anything in the chat because the chat's not.
No, I think they were referring to the Menti.
Oh, the Mentipoll. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Kristen, hi. Welcome. Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm a member of Save the Alewife Brook, and I'd just like to thank everyone who joined this meeting online tonight to show support for improvements in community health and environmental health at Alewife Brook. I'd also like to thank the City of Cambridge for placing signs out on the Alewife path in advance of today's storm, warning the public of the risk of raw sewage flooding. The brook floods regularly, and we have seen people riding bikes through it, through the sewage floodwater, and pushing baby strollers through raw sewage. So we really appreciate that Cambridge has done that. Thank you. I am here tonight because Alewife Brook flooded into my neighborhood and into my home multiple times. My neighbors and I had no idea what was in the water. We were just trying to save our belongings, and we got sick with gross and painful digestive illness, cramping, and bloody diarrhea. And I don't want that to happen to anyone else. There is enormous support for complete sewer separation and also for green stormwater infrastructure. So here is my question. There are many acres of state-owned parkland along Alewife Brook that could be used for green stormwater infrastructure. And in fact, DCR's Alewife Master Plan includes large GSI, including a second stormwater wetland. DCR is basically begging you guys to add more stormwater wetlands in the parkland there. So my question is, why don't you adopt the state's idea of stormwater wetlands on DCR parkland in your plans, along with the associated sewer separation? And my other question is whether you are taking seriously the governor's request that CSOs be eliminated. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Project team, any responses right now to either of those?
I just want to address something, Kristen. The sandwich boards are MWRA's, not Cambridge's. So if we need to thank anybody, is thanking Jeremy and the MWRA team for always putting the sandwich boards there.
Well, we've only seen them there once, I think. So thank you for doing that. I hope you do it moving forward because it's a real serious health problem to have people pushing babies through untreated sewage floodwater. So thank you, MWRA, for doing that, and we hope you do that. You continue to do that.
Thanks, Kristen. We're gonna go to Diane Mann and then Andrea Downs. I'm sorry if I don't get people's names right. Diane. You can unmute and turn on your camera. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I'm Diane Mahan. I'm chair of the Arlington Select Board, designee for all things Life. I've been doing this since back in the 90s when it was Fred Lasky, Mike Ralph, God rest his soul, Owen O'Riordan, and Senator Bob Haven. And it's really frustrating for me because the same issues that were occurring then that I was being told, oh, that's further down the road, kick the can. But it will be addressed. Not only has it not been addressed, it's just gotten worse. Some by failure really to do anything, and some by because of the changes in our climate. I certainly want complete sewer separation by 2050 and the 25-year level of control for the year 2050. I've written, and I do want to thank Councilor Nolan over in Cambridge because she recently had a health and environment subcommittee meeting in the city of Cambridge. And I wasn't able to attend it, but I watched it after, and I'm very encouraged. What's very frustrating for me as an elected official in Arlington, which has neighbors and families that abut White Brook, including our environmental justice community families, which is great just to say EJ whenever it's a popular thing to say, but I have to go down to those houses and go in those houses and in those basements and go through and make sure I wear my hip huggers because I don't want to bring those live bacteria that are being discharged and have been through Cambridge, Somerville, MWRA. And I'm not even going to talk about the quadrangle project that's coming up, Health Peak, preparing comments on that. But in the town of Arlington, I understand cost, but DEP said to us 9-10 years ago, do your I&I program. We have to pay for it within our budget as well as take out bonds for that. But we get it done because it's not a disgusting problem. It's a really serious and real public health problem to families who live down there. And even now, even more importantly, with the DCR building the Greenway and encouraging people in strollers and kids on their bicycles, nothing better than on a great puddle day to go charging through that puddle and you're driving through sanitary napkins, tampons, condoms, and gaga. So I know I'm very frustrated in getting a lot of stuff out. My ask would be, could Arlington please somehow be involved in this process? In my personal opinion, we haven't been. We have Mike Rademacher that goes to the MWRA advisory meetings, our DPW director, and gets to see Rich Raish there, and they've had conversations. But Arlington, that's bearing the brunt of your SH asterisk T, we really need to be more involved, not just being told that you're working with us because it hasn't been happening. So that's my ask. How do I get Arlington seriously involved and heard?
Diane. Sorry. Thank you so much. We're going to go to Andrea Downs and then Andy Racina.
Ona, can we answer some of these questions?
Jump in. There are.
I think Rich wanted to.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Downs, and I'm here because I'm director of the Wastewater Advisory Committee to the MWRA, which is a group that is made up of volunteers. The WAC, as we call it, wants less CSOs and healthy rivers, and we acknowledge climate change and want to see better action on that. But we want data used to determine the best solutions for this and other issues. The Alewife clearly needs some relief from combined sewers. We were down there this May, and it definitely, it's a stinky problem. It would be good if it were better. But we also are mindful that within the MWRA ratepayer system, Cambridge and Somerville, we have some very low income ratepayers, and we need to think about what they can avoid, what they can afford as well. I liked Councillor Nolan's suggestions about a cost benefit analysis. I think a chart would be very helpful for the general public to help them get an idea of what the costs and benefits are. To that, I have two questions for you to consider, but not necessarily to answer tonight. One is, why do expensive solutions that will not eliminate sewage in the rivers, like sewer separation, when there are better alternatives? The second question I have, and this pertains particularly to the Charles, is if water does not run upstream, which I believe it hasn't since the dam was put in at the Science Museum, why focus on the CSO portion of the river when the fecal bacteria percentages are higher and more numerous upstream of the combined sewers than downstream? And that does it for me. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Andrea. Sorry,
I think just briefly, the first comment I think is a good one. We're in the process of evaluating the alternatives, as you said earlier, and I think you make a good point. We'll put that into our evaluation. And the second one, I'm not quite clear on the point. Maybe Chris has some insights on the water quality.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for that comment, Andrea. It's been shown in our modeling work that even if CSOs were eliminated in that lower portion of the Charles, that those concentrations coming from upstream would contribute to the Charles still being not meeting the swimmable and fishable standards. We acknowledge, as we did in the slides, that there is a peak concentration during CSO discharges that we want to understand the impact of. But yeah, that's a great point to make. Even if they're eliminated, our modeling has shown the river will not be fully swimmable and fishable.
Thank you. We're going to go to Andy Frisina and then Michael Lanetto. Andy, please.
Great. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for this meeting, and thank you, of course, for all this complex work behind the scenes. I'm Andy Frisina from the Mystic River Watershed Association, where we are on record as supporting the most ambitious projects our communities can muster to solve this longstanding problem. My most direct question is this: who gets to decide what's too expensive to consider? And this may be a version of similar questions from Patty Nolan and others here, but let me try to ask this general question of who gets to decide more precise. The most important question, it seems, is what level of control is being aimed for in each of these cases. Can you clarify the decision procedure that's being used to decide which level of control will be the design goal? People have alluded to cost benefit calculations, even cost benefit curves and knees of curves. Can we see those curves? Or more generally, can you describe the cost benefit calculation being used to decide among or between the possible levels of control? Thank you.
Thank you. Team members want to respond to that?
That is the next challenge that we're addressing. And there are a few parts to it. One, to complete the draft and put the draft out with all of the information. Certainly we've had these public meetings. We hope that people are getting up to speed on these issues and what goes into it through these public meetings. But then the issuance of that draft report puts all of those recommendations into the public realm. And as Brian outlined, 2026 is when sort of the broad discussion of that, where do we as a region fall out on that cost benefit? And certainly there are aspects of that cost benefit that we're not going to be able to complete by the end of this year. So I think there will be some more of that in 2026. But to get to what we put into that draft, we need Cambridge, Somerville, and MWRA to make a judgment call on where we see the balance on the projects, the level of control, and what our ratepayers will allow. Because we each have sort of, or at least MWRA and Somerville have annual stage gates on what our rate increases are. And we have certain elected officials and certain boards that have to approve that on an annual basis. So our next steps are to go through those processes with the MWRA Board of Directors, with the Somerville City Council, and get their input on where we want that initial position to be in the draft. And to be clear, where we wind up with the final might not be what is proposed in the draft. But that's sort of the evolution of that process. I hope that gives you sort of an understanding of the framework and doesn't sound like a dodge, because I don't want it to be a dodge. It's just a very complicated process with a lot of stakeholders.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much for that answer.
Thanks, Andy. Let's go to Michael Lonetto, and then we'll go to Julie Wood after Michael. Welcome, Michael. You should be able to unmute. Yeah.
Hello. Hi. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the chance to comment here. I'm Mike Lonetto, as you mentioned. I am a Somerville resident and live a few blocks from the Alewife. I live near right where Somerville 001 sewage outlet is, and I walk there frequently with my dog. I bike along the Alewife through the reservation at least weekly, and the condition of the Alewife Brook has not improved in recent years and continues to get worse. Any plan that still allows regular sewage dumping will not improve the situation. For example, this past Friday, September 19th, 2025, I stopped to take a picture of the Broadway Bridge, and it was a great view. The breeze and everything, river looked good. It stank. There had not been a recent CSO at that time. It's just that we had a lot of rain in the spring, we had a lot of releases, and now when the water goes down, it stinks. This will only continue to get worse with increasing storm and drought severity going forward. And I think the drought severity needs to be taken into account as well as the storm severity. This is a large, complex problem with no simple solutions, but I believe it is within the financial and technical capabilities of the MWRA and the Commonwealth to end these CSOs. And it is the responsibility of MWRA to end them legally. Any alternative that fails to achieve better than typical year control is not acceptable. I urge the MWRA to stop kicking the can down the road and put forward a plan that will actually eliminate CSOs on the Alewife to the 25-year level. The Alewife is a brook in use as a sewer. It would have a much greater value as a brook. And I want to also reiterate Kristen's question. Why isn't the large stormwater wetland that was proposed earlier included in any of the sewer separation plans? Thank you.
Thank you. Project team responses to any of that? Bunch of pieces.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. The drought conditions are also interesting, and how that impacts odors is valid. There was actually a couple of releases in September, both CAM 401A and some 001A did have brief spills during some peaky storms. In terms of the wetland, we have had some conversations with DCR. The primary reason why you don't see another proposal like the CAM 4 wetland largely has to do with hydraulics. The location of the CAM 4 wetland in relation to where CAM4 is and where the new stormwater outfall is for the separated stormwater from the previous CAM4 area, was hydraulically adjacent to a large area that could take that by gravity. The sewer separation projects that we're looking at for this one don't have that elevation proximity to the land. You know, we are accounting for the flow attenuation and green stormwater infrastructure in other locations where it works hydraulically and by elevation. You know, certainly if we had an opportunity for something on the DCR land, we'd be pursuing it. But from a technical standpoint, there really aren't that sort of opportunity from it, you know, an engineering sort of standpoint.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Michael. Julie Wood, you are up next, and then it will be Dan Fireside. And I want to just name, as Julie's getting promoted here, we have 10 people with their hands raised right now, and we'd like to get to all of them. So we had intended to stop at 8. We're going to let this run a little longer, assuming we'll be done by 8:30. So just for those, if you have your hand raised, we would like to hear from you. So Julie, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Nice to see everybody on this rainy night. Thank you guys for your presentation, walking through all of those alternatives. Really appreciate that. I'm Julie Wood, the Climate Resilience Director at Charles River Watershed Association. Charles River Watershed Association, similar to my colleagues, is also on record in advocating for the absolute highest level of control here, the 2050, 25-year level of control. In our case, that'd be alternatives 12 or 13. Anything less would be extremely disappointing to us, unacceptable, really. Like others have mentioned, I do wish full sewer separation could have been considered and explored in more detail, maybe sewer separation with some targeted storage. That looking at a lot of these other alternatives, that does seem to present more of an opportunity than maybe was given credence. There's clearly some near-term wins to be had there. I know the timeline potentially is long for full sewer separation. It's a lot of acres. But clearly with those targeted sites, there was some near-term wins to be had there. So move ahead, get some reductions, and then just stop pushing this problem down the road, just modernize our sewer system. So we don't just push this problem continued on our children and their children, because the climate isn't going to change and then stay there. It's keeping changing. That's what we expect. I'd like to ask if you guys could do another public meeting once the financial capabilities analysis is complete, maybe in December, because I think that's going to be kind of complicated and we will probably have questions on that. So if you could do that, we would really appreciate it. I will also acknowledge, yes, there are other solutions of sources of pollution to the Charles. Fully acknowledge that. That doesn't make CSOs okay. They're really disgusting and they cause a lot of issues. And then lastly, CRWA is going to do our own webinar with kind of our more in-depth reactions to all of this on October 9th, 7 p.m. crwa.org. You can sign up and come. We would love to have all of you project partners there as well as all of you in attendance at this meeting. So sign up for our newsletter and you will get the invite to that.
Thank you, Julie. Team members, I'm sort of looking for if you go off mute, if there are things you want to respond to at this time. Anything?
Good feedback. I don't think there are any questions there to respond to, though.
Dan Fireside next, and then we'll go to Marina Goro Atlas. Wait, do we still have Dan? Is Dan somewhere in limbo between? Okay, great. There we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Wonderful. Thanks, and thanks to all the commenters. I agree with all of them. I guess 2 quick points. One is just thinking of the stakeholders as the natural environment, all the flora and fauna. I walk the the Alewife Brook path as often as possible, live very close by. And they are all the creatures there are most impacted by whatever decision we make here. And also the future residents of all these areas. That this is decisions we're making that the future generations are the ones who have to live with. And in that spirit, I fully endorse any proposal that is looking at the 25-year mitigation plans and getting raw sewage out of especially the Alewife Brook, but all the partner groups. My quick sort of question is, as a non-expert in all of this, if you can explain a little more what the benefits of GSI are, because they do seem to raise the cost a lot. I assume they're doing all sorts of wonderful things. If this could be spelled out. The other is, if you can explain a little bit what the impact to the residents are in those areas that, like, we're in that polygon for Somerville. It's where I live and know a lot of folks, but the folks in Winter Hill, is it just like a lot of construction? Like, how much property is being needs to be taken over, and just what the impact is to the neighbors?
Thank you, Dan. So 2 questions: the benefits of GSI, like why were those folded in, and impact to residents of being in the polygons, which I think are the sewer separation.
Yeah, so GSI has sort of benefits at a neighborhood level because it gives us the opportunity to put some vegetation into our very densely urban hardscape. From a technical standpoint, you don't see them having a big benefit on the CSO volumes, largely because the volume that can be taken up in the size of GSI implementations that we're talking about here is relatively small compared to those very big storms that I spoke about at the beginning. However, when we do sewer separation and create a new stormwater outfall, as we were saying, stormwater is also very dirty. And GSI does a very good job of intercepting the pollutants before it gets into that stormwater system and discharged. So, from a technical point of view, in this application, the GSI has the biggest benefit for the sewer separation on that stormwater side. In terms of the impacts, yeah, it's long-term construction in the road. Anytime you do sewer separation, particularly in Somerville, we already have a bunch of underground utilities. It's usually a sequence of digs. We'll usually first have to get the gas line out of the way, and then we'll probably have to move a water main, and then switch over a current combined sewer to be used as sanitary and put it in new stormwater. So it's a lot of digging. It's a lot of excavators. It's a lot of parking restrictions over about a 3-year period per project. We just concluded a sewer separation project in Somerville in the Spring Hill neighborhood, and we're actually going to be doing a I don't want to say post-mortem because that sounds a little fatalistic, but we are going to be doing a survey in that neighborhood and actually ask for real honest feedback on how we manage those the impacts of construction to maybe do it execute it a little bit better on the next project. But that's the types of impacts that you can anticipate.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Dan. Let's go to Marina Goro Atlas, and then Eric Grunebaum will be up next. Marina, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Okay, thank you. I guess this is working. So hi, I'm Marina Guro Atlas. I'm a Belmont resident, but I'm actually from Cambridge, and I've grown up in the area, but I've also lived in Somerville, so I'm a real local about this. I'm an environmental health professional. Just some quick background. I've actually got a background doing environmental justice work, and I used to work for the EPCRA unit and RCRA unit at the at the US EPA Region 1. I've also had the privilege to actually work with the MWRA doing pollution prevention, keeping some chemicals out of the wastewater, making sure good chemicals went in the wastewater. And what a privilege to get a great tour of Deer Island. So I have a couple questions and I'll try to keep it brief and then a little bit of context. So I'm wondering if local wetlands and water boards were engaged in this. I think that's a big consideration and that was unclear to me. And as I understand, it will be important from a regulatory compliance perspective. Another comment, I'm wondering about why longer tunnels are included in this, if it's purely a cost perspective or if that has anything to do with public and environmental health impacts or regulatory compliance. And I'm wondering about if cost cutting is looked at as doing nothing and if we can find some creative solutions for that. So that being said, I'll give you two quick stories. So the first is I'm actually from a family of marine biologists that have done a lot of these types of studies. I grew up tagging along for these types of things. And I'm thinking back to a water study I had the privilege of joining in the Philippines, where fecal coliform was a huge issue, as was the water table, and there was not enough sewerage. Like this, it was severely under the needed capacity. And I'm thinking of that because in 2070 projections, Boston, as we know, is going to be tropical, essentially. And so in thinking about 2050 to 2070, it's going to look a lot more like the Philippines or maybe the Caribbean. And so in thinking about these closed loop systems, I think these are really major considerations. And so, sorry, I'll get through this very quickly. So the longer tunnels, what I saw in the Philippines is it is a time bomb. When the water table rises, that is a major consideration. So I hope we can engage with that. If I can share more information, if anybody from a planning perspective wants those technical details. And then just a really quick point about environmental justice. I'm wondering if the community can be engaged to bring the cost down. It would be irresponsible of me not to remember that US EPA used to have a lot of resources for that. I'm wondering if MWRA would be open to bringing some of those back, such as keeping waste out of garbage disposals and encouraging people and educating them not to use the wastewater as a garbage disposal. Last point, odor control. I'm wondering if people have talked about cardboard and soil building specifically. I've done some work for like basalt powder and soil carbon, and it's a great, great technique specifically for rain gardens, which is in line with US EPA Region 1's educational materials. And just thank you so much to everyone for engaging on this. When I first did bacterial and fecal coliform testing in outflows as a teenager, I never thought that this would be such a wonderful big effort. And just thank you for everybody. Thank you to everybody engaging on this and actually being able to take on and being willing to take on these very big challenges. And I also thank Patty Nolan and Anderson. Thanks.
Let's take you have two questions. See if anybody on the project team wants to answer them. Thank you so much. Local wetlands and water board involvement and why the long tunnels, I think, were the questions in there.
Maybe I can jump on here. The local water boards, I assume you're talking about like conservation commissions, people of that nature. So once these projects get more solid, and we actually start to develop real plans for these. At this point, this is all conceptual type stuff. So at that point, yes, we would be reaching out to local conservation commissions, seeking their input, seeking their approval where needed. And with regard, I'm not quite sure I understand, longer tunnels, the tunnels that are included in these conceptual plans are, put together or sized to capture a certain volume of water. So, the tunnels that are shown are extremely large in diameter, especially for some of these larger storm events. The 25-year design storm, 2050, 25-year design storm. If I remember correctly, it was 32-foot diameter over 1.4 miles. That length is really needed to 30-something foot diameter tunnel is maybe even beyond what's capable of being built in the Boston area. Is going to be an extremely challenging job to build something of that magnitude, that diameter. So it wouldn't be possible to build it shorter,
Thank you, Brian.
have that
Thank you,
volume.
Marina. We're going to go to Eric Grunenbaum and then Gary Goldsmith. Eric, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
There you go.
Thanks for the extensive presentations. My focus is Alewife Brook, which I live nearby. First, a quick comment or two, then a question or two. Please, thank you for the great work so far, and let's just stop using our neighborhood as a sewage dump in our lifetimes. We want 25-year control by 2050, complete separation and major new green infrastructure. And we're really asking MWRA to lean in and finish the job of cleaning up Boston Harbor. It really was basically left in Alewife Brook to some extent. So thank you for this work, and let's keep going. I also want to note that on GSI, I think there were some additional benefits that weren't mentioned. Reductions in heat and air pollution, increases in habitat, and benefits to health and well-being. And I think that's a really important part of GSI in the dense urban neighborhood that I think Rich referred to. So my questions, so I saw on that on the maps for Alewife Brook that Ringe Ave was used to increase conveyance to CAM 401A in, I think, 11 out of the 12 alternatives. And I'm wondering if what is being conveyed, is that combined sewerage and stormwater, or is it one or the other? So that's my first question. And the second is a little more on GSI. I wonder if the maps could show the locations and sizes of hypothetical GSI. I'm just wondering, where is it going on those maps? And, you know, could we show that? Could we share that? Obviously not tonight. And what kinds of GSI are we talking about? Large or like little bump outs? Or are we talking about significant GSI? So those are my two questions. I appreciate it. Those may be for you, Jim and Luchika, since they're Cambridge questions, but look forward to hearing what you think about that.
Thank you, Eric.
Yep, thanks for the questions, Eric. Just in related to the conveyance upsize for the 401A project, that is increasing the size of the current combined sewer on Sherman Street and Ringe Avenue. We're looking at options on how that could be used initially for conveyance of combined sewage, but in the future, could that pipe be used for sewer separation? So those are the options that we're looking at, but we definitely have an opportunity with some space there on Ringe Ave to upsize that existing pipe that's there. And could you just repeat your question on the GSI for me?
Well, I'm just wondering if the maps, you know, like 11 out of 12 of them refer to GSI, but there's nowhere where I see like a little patch of green mentioning, you know, what that is or where it could be. And you know, Jim and others, that I've advocated for the 10 acres of the MBTA garage, which is state land, as being one of the potential sites. So it's sort of like, where is that GSI and how big is it? And, you know, anyway, that's the question.
Yeah, so I think we showed in a couple of the alternatives, you know, up to 36 acres of GSI in the Alewife watershed. Looking for any opportunities on where we can site that. It's likely not going to be in big chunks. It's probably going to be in smaller locations, could be on individual streets. As you and I have talked about in the past, we have done these in other areas in Cambridge, but looking for any opportunities to put that in.
Yeah, I'll just add one last comment, which is actually Kristen thought of this. I think it was Kristen. The garage, there's another unbuilt site. Well, it had some buildings on it, but the old Aku Summer Shack site. Maybe that site could be used to build the new garage, and then that would allow the current garage to be operating while they're building the new garage. This is a big idea. I know it's late in the process, but it's an interesting idea, and that might also leave some space in that 10 acres for more GSI. Anyway, we can stop there and follow up another time, but thank you.
Luchika,
Eric.
Just quickly, a lot of the green stormwater infrastructure we tend to be able to implement in communities such as Cambridge, Somerville, and these urban communities are actually underground and not truly green. They don't have vegetation, right? But they do the work that we needed to do, like, which is treating stormwater. So just wanted to put that out there, right? We call it green stormwater infrastructure, but a lot of it is subsurface, under the ground infiltration systems for the water.
Yeah, I don't call that green because it's not green,
right.
unfortunately.
Thank you, Eric. We're gonna go to Gary Goldsmith next, and then Ann McDonald. Welcome, Gary. Gary, you'll need to unmute and turn on your camera.
On and unmuted. There we go.
Oh,
Okay,
perfect.
so a couple of things quickly. Thank you very much for doing this. And obviously, this is a big project, and an enormous amount of work has already gone into it and will continue to go into it. I live in Arlington. I'm a Precinct 11 town meeting member. I've lived here for 40 years. When I moved here in the mid 80s, the big regional water and sewer project was underway. And if I remember correctly, under Paul Levy, that came in on time and on budget. And hopefully we could do the same thing here. I did want to, I think it's important to look at all of the alternatives as you are doing. Some of them seem aspirational, but I think we need to aim high. We need to be pragmatic, but we need to aim for as perfect as possible. We don't want perfect to be the enemy of good, but we should aim for as perfect as we possibly can get. In part because this is a truly long-term project, and we're building this for our children and our grandchildren, and hopefully we build it well enough so that it's our great-grandchildren and perhaps theirs. I appreciate the consideration of long-term effects of climate change. Maybe 5 to 7 years ago, I read that it was expected that the summers in the Boston area were going to be not unlike those in Baltimore. I've lived in Baltimore and Washington, and we are getting there real fast. Finally, I had a specific question, and that was about the Alewife MBTA station. Has there been some coordination with them in terms of construction about including a large storage facility as part of that project? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Responses on the Alewife question?
So thanks for your questions, Gary. Yeah, we have met with folks at the MBTA. Last time we met, they were soliciting proposals for selecting a consultant that they would then use to develop a plan for the site. We have open communication with them, and we will be meeting with them again to discuss potential alternatives for CSO control. So that is on the plate. It seemed a little early to be continuing our discussions at this point, but it's going to happen in the future.
Thank you both. Let's go to Ann McDonald, and then we'll go to Eugene Benson. Ann, welcome.
Hi, I'm Ann McDonald. I am thankful for all the hard work that's already gone into this large, complex problem. I'm going to focus on the Alewife because I live right across from the Alewife in Cambridge, and I support the 25-year 2050 control plan. That we'd have capacity to not have any CSOs in that condition of the 25-year storm. But when I look at the chart for Alewife, I see the only options are the tunnels that would meet that, if I'm reading this correctly. And then that means I just heard from MWRA that that's probably not feasible in the Boston area. So I feel like what I'm wishing for is more specificity on the sewer separation front per water body, in particular alewife, and more clarity, because I did hear things that were really informative, but they're not anywhere in these documents about hydraulics. So, you know, last meeting in number 4, there was a new stormwater outfall in Somerville or above some 10 or 001, and now it's all pumps down to Mass Ave and then a storage area at Mass Ave and Alewife Parkway. So I feel like there's a lot of, and then I'm not clear. I'm just acting as a person from the general public, why certain areas are chosen for sewer separation and others not. So I think that the clarity of conceptually letting us know this area is great because it will go down to an existing pipe. This area would be a lower priority. I wish we could see a better sense of all of that. I love this new idea of the micro tunnels. That seems doable. They seem like those are the diameter you all could do without us hearing that's never going to happen. So I'm just hoping that there could be some more planning that would come under that last column that would involve green stormwater infrastructure and sewer separation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Just seems like a good moment to mention that for anybody who hasn't been on the project website yet, in addition to the slide set, there are project sheets with more information about each of the alternatives. And we will put that link into the chat so that people can find that easily. And you can read more. It may or may not answer all the questions that were just raised.
I do want to thank everyone for hanging in there. There's a lot of detail here, and it's difficult to get your head around all of it. So I appreciate the feedback that helps us think of other ways and different ways of communicating this. Thanks.
I'm just going to keep on now. We have 5 more people. It's 8:15. We're doing good. I'm going to can we get Eugene up, and then Tom Gould will be after. Oh wait, Tom stepped away. Sorry, after Eugene will be Russell Bartosh. Welcome, Eugene. You will need to unmute and turn on your camera. Eugene, can you find the unmute and camera buttons lower left?
And I just prompted you to unmute, Eugene, so you should get a little pop-up. Yeah.
Can you oh, you had it for a second. Try one more second, then we can get Russell up if that's not working, and give Eugene a sec to figure that out. That's good. Let's invite Russell over, and then Eugene, feel free to turn on your camera when you sort of have figured that out. So we'll know and we'll go to you. Russell Bartosh up next. Russell, now you'll want to unmute and turn on your camera.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Welcome.
Okay. Can you see me? Oh no. I think there's something wrong with my laptop camera, unfortunately. I was on a meeting yesterday and it didn't work, so I apologize for that.
No problem. Welcome.
Okay, so I'd like to thank the presenters for their presentation tonight. I'd like to thank all the commenters who know a lot more about this than I do. And I just really have one comment. I was at the State House today testifying on a healthy school bill, and after we're done with our presentation, I get a comment about financing. And I know there's a way to do this in a financial manner. And I just look at the individual and I'm like, what about the people? What about the children that, getting affected by the quality of the air and the materials in the building? And, that's what this is about. And I'd like all these presenters here to kind of think of as it is they lived here and they were being affected by it, and make your decision that way. Because I'm looking at 47 presentations or whatever the number was. It's crazy. I mean, you got to come up with the best possible solution you can. And I don't think 47, ideas are, I think you got to narrow it down. So, there's been a lot of good work done. I appreciate everything you've done, and let's make sure we get a great project. And help the people and the residents that are being affected through no fault of their own. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Eugene, you want to try again? Just turn on your camera and or unmute. Looks like you're unmuted. You could speak. You want to try? Let's bring Susan Stamps in. Eugene, if you want to test anytime, we want to hear what you have to say also. But let's bring Susan Stamps and then we'll go to Gwen Spieth. Susan, you'll have to accept. Oh, good. There you are.
There we go.
Great.
Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Stamps. I'm from Arlington. I moved to Arlington 15 years ago from out in the Concord, Carlisle area. For its wonderful combination of urban, being sort of urban and also tons of green space. And I've been on the tree committee the whole 15 years I've been here. I'm a jogger and a walker, and the Alewife Greenway is on my path. And I started attending these meetings as soon as they started being held. So after 10 or 15 years, and number one, I'm amazed that you finally come up with some actual plans. Honestly, I was like, it's never going to happen. They're not serious. Forget about it. So I was very, very pleased tonight to hear about all the very hard work I'm sure that's gone into these plans that I can't begin to understand, but I want to tell you that I really appreciate you for getting to this point. A couple of points I wanted to make is I did feel that our select board member, Diane Mahan, made a good point when she asked why Arlington is not at the table, meaning on the team. It looks like we have a representative from Cambridge. I don't know if Somerville is affected or if someone from Somerville is on the team, but I'd like an answer to why Arlington is not on the team. I feel that over the years, if the Arlington Select Board and town government had been more plugged into the process, maybe things would have moved along a little bit more quickly. And also, I had Gary Goldsmith's question about using the MBTA rebuild as location for retention, which I thought you gave a great and thoughtful answer to. And finally, I do want to pick up on what Marina Atlas said about how in 2050 to 2070, we're going to have more like a Caribbean climate. And what that means is not only that it's going to be a lot hotter, but it could be that we have a lot of climate refugees living in the whole Boston urban area. And I hope that you will plan for possibly a huge surge in the population because of climate change and the people who are coming up to New England so that they can survive. And so I'd be interested in your thoughts on that too. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Rich, you want to go?
I'll leave the question on climate refugees to someone who's slightly less just stunned by that thought. Thanks for that. But in terms of Arlington having a seat at the table, as I said at the very beginning of tonight's presentation, that this is essentially a continuation of work that was started in the 80s. And specifically the plan that we're updating right now, the players defined in doing this work that we're doing, all that work that you just saw, Cambridge, Somerville, and MWRA were specifically named as the parties who would have to do this plan. And we had to, this is now years back, we had to submit a scope of work to 3 parties. And so essentially this is a process that had been essentially defined by DEP and agreed to by EPA in the late 90s, frankly, in terms of the framework. and then reaffirmed in the approval of the scope of work a couple years back. And so we've been sort of working within that framework, right, wrong, or indifferent. I have been vocal about my frustration that other communities that we're not looking for, or we can't look at solutions outside of that box because there's a lot of opportunities outside of that box. But that's just sort of the process in which we find ourselves. The plus side is that by having these three entities be responsible, we are doing this work that otherwise might not have happened. So there are pluses and minuses to that, but that's essentially the reason.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Susan. Eugene, I see you. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. I had to change machines. Sorry, there
You're
seemed to
good.
be a problem. Apologize. I just have two things. The first has to do with how the group is going to actually calculate the benefits. It hasn't really been discussed. And what I've seen done in the past, which I think is not acceptable, is simply to figure out how much increase in water quality benefits there will be, where really there are so many other benefits, such as ecosystem services, public health benefits, fewer GI diseases, environmental justice benefits, etc. And I think, at least for me, I think it would benefit if the project team could have a meeting with some of us to go over how the benefits might be calculated. I think both Patty Noland and Andy Hisrana from Mystic River and some other folks mentioned that too. And I would hate for the project team to get too far ahead so they can't pull back on what they're doing in benefits. So I would encourage them to set up a meeting with us to talk about how benefits might be calculated. The second is one of the slides that was shown that showed what the potential discharges were into Alewife Brook, even in the 2050 25-year design storm showed annual discharge of 40 million gallons of combined sewage. Yet in 2021, 50 million gallons of combined sewage went in to the Alewife Brook. So there seems to be a disconnect between the actual amount of sewage that's going in and what's been calculated for 2050. And I wondered if somebody could comment on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Eugene. Luchika, a response?
Yeah, so Gene, that 40.9 million gallons is just for one storm, right? For the 25-year storm.
Okay, so you would
So when you
anticipate-
add, so then you think of all the other storms that you have in a year, right?
Mhm.
Those would be captured as well, right? So you're comparing a one storm discharge from that table, which is just one storm, a large storm in the 2050 typical year, with a whole year of discharges that happened in the past.
So if no, that's really helpful. Thank you, Luchika.
No problem.
If you achieve the 25-year storm level, you would be doing a lot more than stopping 40.9 million gallons. You'd probably be stopping, can you guess, 80 million, 90 million? What do you think?
Well, it would be at least the sum of, right, the 2050 typical year plus the 5-year storm. I don't know, can somebody put up that slide quickly?
I don't
It's
have the
just,
slide.
yeah,
We're talking about a lot more than 40 million gallons. We're talking about
right, correct, like
many more million gallons in a 25-year
right,
storm.
but we're designing up to that, right? So that's why the tunnel is that big and that's large to capture as much as that, and then smaller storms.
Okay, so
for the
it's
duration of the
actually-
year.
Okay,
Yes.
that's really helpful to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Eugene. I'm glad we got you in the mix. We have two, we're almost at 8:30. We have two more people. We're gonna take them both and then we will wrap up. Gwen Spieth, you are up. Welcome. You were unmuted for a second.
Hi, are you, I was logging in and I assumed you were calling on me. Hi. Trying for the video again. There we go. Hello, hello. One quick question, is Cambridge factoring in all of the new sewage new wastewater that's coming online from IQHQ, the development in the Triangle and in the Quad? I ask as somebody who lives near the alewife and who really I'm distressed because I am questioning whether I've been endangering my health because I've been walking near the alewife brook basically since the pandemic. And the more I read about it, when I read this BU study about the negative health effects of potentially even aerosolized E. coli and fecal coliform, I feel like I've been making myself sick, and I would love, reassurances that that walking in my state park is not causing me to be ill. It's just to kind of bring it back to brass tacks or poop. Like I live near an open sewer. I just can't believe that this has somehow been normalized. And I know you folks all care about it, and this is what you do, and you dedicate yourselves to it. I think it's really important to remember that people live here, and it's emotionally making us sick, but it's physically making us sick. And I would love to know that. Here's my question. I mean, I have a million questions, but one of them is anything going to be done before 2029? Is there anything in terms of mitigation, public health protection, odor control, or at least on-site notification so people are not subjecting themselves to this? There are thousands of commuters walking by the stinkiest places. It's what's being done now, and is anything going to take place before? I know this is a meeting about the long-term control plan, but is anything happening in the immediate term? I'm scared, and I am sick, and I don't know if I'm making myself sick. Thanks.
Thank you, Gwen. Responses on the near-term action and notification piece at all at this point?
Yeah, I did. Go ahead, Brian.
We are, working to develop feasibility studies for notification systems that was released a while back to help identify when CSOs are discharged into the water bodies and notify people by visual cues as to whether something has occurred. So we are working towards that and have developed reports on that and submitted them already. Those are available on the Summer Voice website. So that is something that's being done. With regard to reduction in CSO, near future, I mean, there's continued work that's going on. I mean, it's not right in the Alewife Brook though, unless Cambridge has something that is in the works all along the Alewife Brook.
Could I just say something really important that was not clear from the presentation? I'm shutting off my video because it messes up my bandwidth. It was not made clear that 100% of the alewife CSOs are untreated. And I hope that's factoring into your calculations about priorities, because you look at the Charles, you look at the Mystic, we don't want CSOs anywhere, but 100% of our CSOs, as Patrick so eloquently said in a recent meeting, is flushing your toilet, walking out to the brook. Like, it's the same thing. And that's really important. And Lucica made it clear that we're not getting treatment. So some kind of mitigation soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Gwen.
Yeah, more long term.
I just did want to address Gwen's question about a couple of developments in Cambridge, and factoring in the sewer discharges from those, yes, we are both the IQ/HQ developments off of Whittemore Avenue and also the Health Peaks development in the Alewife quadrangle. We are definitely looking at the new sewer flows from both of those developments as part of our planning.
Thank you. Thank you, Gwen. Final comment or question, David Stoff. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, very good, because I'm going to ask you a short question that will have pretty much a yes or no answer. For the last year and a half or so, MWRA Cambridge and Somerville have been meeting jointly with DEP and US EPA. And you've been recording those meetings through your through minutes, meeting minutes, and those minutes have been a vital source of information for those of us who are engaging you on a more detailed level. I can't get those minutes anymore, and I want to know why. Brian, Jeremy, Jim, Rich, and now Luchika, you all have never missed one of those meetings. So why can't I get the minutes for those anymore?
There's no reason why you won't get those meeting minutes, David. I think what's probably gone on is the project team has been very busy. We need to finalize the minutes, and all agree to them, and then you will definitely receive them. We've received, notifications from our folks at MWRA that deal with the public information requests, and we will be processing those and getting them over to you.
So
I
you have no
apologize if they've been
minutes
late.
available from the July meeting?
Jeremy, do you have a response on that, where those stand? I thought we were close on those.
The minutes have to go through the reviews between the parties and then to EPA and DEP, and then they will be released. So we are behind on them, David. We are working to finalize
They
them.
were a great source of information, and I really wish that we were receiving them because it helps us be true partners rather than just flailing blindly. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone. We are going to stop now. Everyone's who had a hand has spoken once. I see Marina's up. Okay, Marina, I'm going to give you, no, I'm going to stop it because then we're just going to start with other people putting up their hands again. So we are going to wrap. I want to put just this final reminder of points of contact for the website. You can also look in the chat. There's some details on that from over the course of the meeting and what you can find. Again, from tonight's meeting, there are the meeting slides, which includes all those slides on the alternatives, the 37 alternatives, and then the project sheets, which have more information about particular alternatives if you want to delve deeper. There will also be this recording, and we'll also put up the Mentimeter, right? The responses that you all typed in. So we'll get those up and people can look at those as you wish. Thank you so much. We still have 78 participants, 2 hours and 40 minutes in. You all are amazing. We will talk to you soon. Be well, everyone. Thank you for your interest and thoughts and questions and comments. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.